All right, well, welcome back to Dallas International Film Festival. Thank you for coming in. Really appreciate you. Appreciate you being here.
I'm the one who thanks. It's been very generous, very enthusiastic reception. Yeah.
Have you been to Dallas before?
Never.
Oh, well, welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to Texas.
Yes, very nice people.
Thank you.
It is a step above. Yeah.
No, you're in São Paulo?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Not as nice people.
Oh. Yes. I'm sure they're lovely.
Colder. Yeah.
I'm sure it's beautiful though. I've never made it to Brazil. I wish.
It's very urban, very vertical. Yeah. It's our type A in South America, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about First Act. I've gotten to see it, but for the folks at home who can't make it to the festival, if you can give them like kind of a short summary without any spoilers.
It's a film about two theater students that develop a friendship as they are struggling with a teacher in common who wants to just train them, and they are really concerned about trying to get their colleagues to join them in protests against the cuts in the budget of the culture policies.
Mm-hmm. Now that's an event it is really going on. This isn't just pure fiction. That's going on. It's happening right now. Is that correct?
Yeah. The film was informed by reality. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and so we were talking a little bit, spoke with my interview partner last night about some of the events that are happening across Brazil right now in regards to the creation of art. Can you tell our American audience a little bit more about that?
Well, a couple weeks ago, we had it's been snowballing for a while now, but just a couple weeks ago it got really drastic when the union's accountancy trial, I guess that's how you would translate, it emitted this order that prevents the National Agency of Cinema of signing up any new contract unless they would revise all their accountancy within 60 days. It's a very technocratic move, ideologically based, because they know they don't have the staff to do that.
That's an extremely tall order for any company to be doing that does not have just scads of reserve to hire an accounting firm to come in immediately and take over.
Wow, it's a death sentence. They're doing this. They have a clear agenda because the filmmakers have been very organized and voiced out their opinions in every chance they could. Just like I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Get using the platforms to be dissent voices against the values of this new far-right administration. So it's a clear revenge move. They want to. It's real McCarthyism.
Yeah. And anyone who's familiar with American film history can remember the Hollywood 10 and the Hollywood blacklist, where a lot of artists were accused of being communists, whether it was true or not, whether it had any validity or not. But they were all blacklisted from taking part in any film productions in the U.S., and it destroyed a lot of careers, not just the people that were the list.
Yeah, and also like when we see through what they're implying, like being communists in Brazil, it's this whole rhetoric that sounds like, okay, we're back in the 50s, it's the cold era once again. Any progressive value, people that want to speak out against LGBTQ plus discrimination, want to speak in the favor of African Brazilian rights, gender equality, that do not conform with the idea of traditional families, that you gotta have a man that is the household the one that sustains, and the wife has to be the keeper, and this and that. These people are being persecuted. Also, this is, I'm just talking about film, but just after that we had a 23% cut in the culture budget, the total culture budget. So we're talking about museums, libraries, thousands of jobs, hundreds of different funds and these funds are also including social projects that are looking into, you know, the disenfranchised kids. Some of these projects were related. For instance, Projeto Guri is a project that one managed to survive, but is connected to teaching music to kids that are disenfranchised. These kids from the favela that are learning classical music and transforming their lives through it. Yeah. So what are you exactly doing when you're doing that? You know what I mean? It's really an attack towards humanistic values. They're trying to imply all the time that they'll manage to balance out the economy doing that. It's it's a ridiculous amount that you really get by cutting that. Yeah. The Brazilian cinema industry just flourished, and it was generating a greater GDP amount than the pharmaceutical industry. That's very big.
In America, that would be massive.
It is very big. It's thousands of jobs. So if you're talking about jobs, you know, why would you do that? It's completely paradoxical, because it's an ideological agenda. You know, it is not technically based. It disguises itself as technical.
Yeah. It's okay. So what? Having a hard time forming my thoughts because I'm like focusing on you and I'm not paying attention to what I'm supposed to be asking. Like, what do you feel like is the ultimate aim of this little chess game they seem to be playing with Brazilian artists?
It's a clear agenda. Our new president, when he assumed office, the next day he said, well, the ones that are against us will either have to flee or they will be thrown into the how do you call that, the thing that is underneath the house?
Oh, the dungeon? The
dungeons. Or they will be persecuted or whatever. He said that in his acceptance speech.
Wow.
And this is a man that has praised the torturers of the dictatorship, convicted torturers, many a times publicly. He has praised the torture of our ex-president Dilma. She was tortured in prison, and he has done that publicly, facing her in public spaces within the chambers. You know, so this is a man that has no problem stating his agenda. It is even caricaturesque. You know. So he wants to hunt out the artists, because the artists have been so connected to the political issues, to the main political topics, you know, also minority topics, and have been very blunt not to accept this new administration, not to expect the grace of this new administration, and be quiet in order to get this. To get funds and whatever. So he I mean, this is a message to he wants to say, well, whoever doesn't agree with us will have its means of survival cut, and then we'll also list them. We'll be aware of which protests they go to, who they voted for, if they supported someone's campaign. If you donate money for campaigns by other people, many times you get the federal police to look into your accounts, you know, your Facebook.
Wow.
You know, it's really, really intense right now.
So, I mean, do you feel like artists will leave? Are they leaving?
There has been a diaspora has started already, even before the second turn of the voting, when people really felt he was going to be elected. There has been some mostly people connected to the more frontline social movements, like the people that do not have land. They have a very organized social movement, or people that occupy buildings, occupations. How do you call that? Squats.
Yeah, squatting.
They use, you know, governmental buildings that are not being used, and these people have to live on the streets, and these people are framed as terrorists now. So they've managed to manipulate the law so that they're framed as a law that existed before, but they've manipulated it so that they're framed as terrorists. Artists not as much for now.
Yeah, not yet.
But not yet. But back in the 60s, when we had a dictatorship, it was the same story. We had a lot of people that flew to Portugal or France, or some people thought of Uruguay, but maybe Uruguay will have a right-wing turnout in this year's election as well.
Wow.
So it's very scary. Yeah.
It's always interesting, and you see this throughout history, that politicians can feel so threatened by artists.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Because so many, I guess, I wonder, because so many people kind of write artists off as just, oh, well, art is a frivolous thing, that's a luxurious thing, you know, it's not the survival blood of society. And yet people are so threatened when artists organize, or there's a controversial piece that's produced. People find it immensely offensive. So you wonder, you know, if art doesn't matter, then why do people work up a sweat about it?
Yeah, well, because it does. That's why they built the pharaohs, the pyramids, whatever symbolical. It's the symbolical realm, I guess, and victory in the symbolical realm. We've had Bolsonaro many a times criticizing artists on Twitter, just like Donald Trump. You know, he goes.
I understand the feeling.
He calls Spike Lee a racist after the Oscars. I mean, it's this sort of operation. He's trying to desperately to win in the symbolical realm, because it is so important. It is so everybody's paying attention to these messages across the world, and so. And now that we have presidents that are the right wing of the right hand of Twitter, you know, they're always trying to transmit their values through this direct means of communication. You can see how much they're concerned with the symbolical realm. So when you have symbolical victories, the symbolical triumph of certain values, you really can change the core of a society, as its form, apparent shape is still the same. You know, you can everything may seem like it's peaceful, but if you change if there's a symbolical victory, you have really changed the soul of a nation. You know, and that might be very, very sad. You know,
it's. When you're saying this, I'm remembering back in film school, you know, the first class you take is the history of film, and, you know, being in the U.S., we focus mostly on Western film history. And one of the first artistic movements you learn about is German Expressionism, German horror, and how most of those filmmakers, when it came into the 1920s, early 1930s, were forced out of Germany because, you know, the Nazi party said, you know, we're not going to have this idea floating around that we're some kind of degenerate society, you know, that there are problems here, you know, that are expressed in horror films. And from then on, you know, there was a Nazi figurehead who took over the German film industry, and it was only, you know, extremely majestic, very pro-Germany, ultra positive art that was produced after that. You know, it went from being personal expression to government propaganda. So I guess that's kind of coming to mind when we talk about, you know, the government trying to get working its claws into artistic expression. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. They want submissive art because they preach submissiveness. They are. It's a typical counter-accusation tactic. You know, the degenerates want to call people that want to fight this degeneration of human values the degenerate. So when you get these fascists that want women to play the role of, you know, nannies, you know, they want submissiveness. They want, black people should be in their corner, you know, Latinos should be here. We don't want to see this LGBTQ plus. They want to regulate society, and they use art. They use submissive art. They want submissive artists. Yeah. And whenever you get in submissive art, which is really what I'm for, you know, it bothers them so much. You can see the effects. I mean, sometimes we have films that are auteur films that are not that would be otherwise obscure to and that in Brazil we've had many cases of art exhibitions, theater shows, films that were completely how do you call that when people want to stop the shows? They've been
censored shows.
Almost, yes. We've had huge movements. People were very aggressive trying to stop these things. Judith Butler, when she visited Brazil, they were calling her like a witch. They were saying she was trying to pass on the gender ideology to make children become homosexual, as if your preference
because she can speak and convert them to one thing or the other. I'm sure.
I mean, if it's a choice or not, that's questionable. Or I mean, the idea of binary, all of this, so it's this huge wave of fear and of trying to regulate every sphere of our life, our sexuality, our dreams, our desires, the way we express love, what we think a family should look like in the 21st century. How do we feel the Southern Hemisphere should behave right now? Do we feel the Southern Hemisphere should be submissive still? When it has all this huge cultural reserve, Africa, Latin America, So it's really a reactionary wave to progresses that were happening, actually, I think.
Yeah. I like your term submissive art, because that's kind of a theme in your film. We have a acting professor who I thought it was really interesting that they're rehearsing Coriolanus.
Yeah.
But acting professor does not like, one of our lead characters kind of brings in a presentation of mixed media, trying to set the script of Coriolanus against a contemporary background.
Yep.
And the professor is not down with that. It has to be the classic, the Shakespearean setting, and thought that was an interesting twist that you're bringing. Coriolanus, which is, if you haven't read it, it's a lot about populist politics and who should have power, who should have a voice, and who should not.
Yeah. The whole idea of teaching technique sometimes can be it can be very empty when you're facing very urgent situations, and sometimes even teaching can become, or being a big artist too, it can become a system of power. You can be corroborating this idea of the claiming of power, this idea of normatizing relationships, and this idea of when you yourself encompass this sort of fascist values. There's a very nice text by Guattari from the 80s called "We All Want to Be a Fascista," that talks about even within the left, some behaviors we have can try to normatize even sexuality or marital relationships with values that are foreigners, that are foreigners. And that, I think, also plays a role, because if he's a theater teacher, you would suppose he's not that much of a bigot.
Right.
He's trying to maintain his small power within the classroom, and he's a bit afraid, and he's like in this in-between phase. I've had teachers like that. I was very cocky like the students in the film, thinking I was the leader of the class and stopping the class at all times. I would argue with everyone, with the students, with the teacher, countering everything that the teacher said. So there's also a little bit of a self-criticism exercise, I think, that we must do within the left wing. And I also, the youngsters, when they're battling against their teacher, they also hurt the feelings and also the moments of education of their colleagues. And as long as we're talking to other people like they're idiots because they're religious, or because they're a bit more conservative, or because they couldn't see a point that we were trying to make, we're not in the right side. And this is a huge loss we had, the left, worldwide, and we should hold ourselves accountable for that, because the right wing could not have done what they are doing without
division.
Without us, talking to everyone like they're idiots. I mean, I mean, being left wing is not enough. If we are true humanists, we want to relate to alterity. We want to face the diversity, different values, people that come from the isolated countryside and be able to connect, or religious people, which played a huge role in Brazil.
Yeah.
The evangelical movement really aligned with this neo-militaristic values, you know. So if they feel they have to do that, there's something that we must understand about their fears and desires.
Yeah.
And these are worker women and worker men, you know. So we got, if we're humanists, we got to relate to them. The teacher also, he's a bit inspired in relationships I've had with teachers and mentors and this kind of stuff. And he also, there's this idea also that in this dialectical movement that I'm not pro also like what happened in the Chinese Cultural Revolution.
Sure.
You take teachers to the square.
Yes, you're
right?
not teaching the right thing and pull out the gun.
Yeah. Sometimes these people have interesting things to say, and sometimes you need friction. I also think that being left wing or being a humanist is about, you know, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, you know, and sometimes you need people that will come with very different opinions, because in the era of internet and social media, we're all used to agreeing with each other all the time. Otherwise,
yes,
you will hunt this person. You say, oh, you start accusations and you start all this crazy stuff, and this was happening. That's why Guattari wrote that. And he was with Deleuze. They were a homosexual couple, and they were talking about this movement of control, of power, you know, that was already happening there, and it's happening once again, you know. So we gotta watch out, because this also feeds up the crazy right wing, you know.
Wow. So, okay. I do want to, we talked a little bit about the teacher.
Yeah.
Are you in a teacher role now?
I've taught a little bit. I'm trying to get more and more into it. So yeah, it is a deep wish. I've taught a little bit, but.
And you work in multiple mediums, right? Like you're like the student that we see. You know, you're a theater director. Obviously, you're here with a film.
Yeah.
I mean, what is kind of your word to young artists about experimenting? You know, and meeting new people, reaching out in that way.
Yeah, I just have because I have so many great theater director friends. If they hear me calling myself a theater director, they'll go like, "Oh, you're cocky. You're still cocky." I've directed last time in 2008, but I came from theater directing, then into film. My word to young. You said my word to young
artists.
Artists. Understanding technique is very important. I think I consider myself a worker man in film. I don't like the word artist. Sometimes it gives me rashes because it implies sometimes the marble tower.
The auteur.
Yeah, and it can get elitist very easily.
Certainly.
Yeah, you know, and I really feel connected to the workers. I grew up in the left. My parents, you know, in the unions, and so that's my place. So. But then, even in this workers film worker role, I feel that art has specific things we do, and I feel it is important to understand technique as a worker, but also to understand what is it that you feel you need, you want to express.
Yeah. What motivates you?
Yeah, what you want to express, and that you really need to talk about, something that is really urgent. When you're relating to professors or mentors and this kind of stuff as a young artist, I feel it is really important that you use your 2 ears when one is open and the other is closed. You listen. Part of you listen. The part of you do not. You listen to yourself, and you got to. It's a tricky balance, but you have to understand that sometimes the wrong way is your own way. there's no doorkeepers, especially in the era of the internet.
Yeah.
You can really find the people that want to talk to you, not just your audience in a marketable sense, but really people that you can exchange with, you know. And it's the whole idea of art, that you want to express things that you would not be able to do in another medium. And do things about what you're obsessed about. If you're thinking about whatever, if you're thinking about sex all the time, we've got directors that do that. Make films about that. There's no rules. I mean, if you're thinking about politics all the time, if you're thinking about family or religion, or really don't the trends are important, and it's important for you to be aware, but you gotta know what your place of speech is, I guess. Yeah.
Couple more things before we go. Now that I did not know I knew that there was a lot happening politically in Brazil at this point, and that the right wing has been making a move for a while now, but I did not know the situation of the artists and the culture workers there. So, I mean, is there anything that people like us, the film festival community, the U.S. artistic community, can be doing, be in solidarity with you?
Well, especially, I mean, obviously, especially the groups that are more, we have degrees, there are groups that are more fragile right now. Like, for instance, we have transgender filmmakers, African Brazilian filmmakers. Sure. There's groups of female directors, and they have websites, and of course I can give them afterwards. And these people would really appreciate the help, looking into their films. Of course, if you feel you connect to them, selecting them to your festivals. If you feel you can support them to come. These people have really a lot to say. Many a times when you get countries like this, where things are so raw, and so you will get very nice Q&As and very real situations, debates.
Sure.
Also, like, if you see Kickstarter or this kind of movements, you could help, because right now the funding has been completely cut off. So these groups will be the first ones that within a year's time or less won't be able to make films anymore. Yeah, and also, like, for instance, this film of mine premiered in Rotterdam.
Okay.
Rotterdam just had a Brazilian black filmmakers retrospective. It was part of it was a retrospective, but it also had new filmmakers.
Okay.
Right. So you can see them in the selection, and you can support them. Or like Berlin, many times you have a lot of Brazilian films. It's very paradoxical. This late years, we've had many Brazilian films, and this is when they cut the funding. But because when we go to the festivals, we make sure we talk social. We're not just talking about our own poetics.
Yes. All for one here.
Yeah. So that's one thing. Yeah.
And also, talking about First Act, where can people who can't make it to the festival, where can they learn more about it, learn more about your work and other Brazilian artists' work, and about First Act in particular? We have a Facebook page. It's called, it's the Brazilian name. I'll put First Act too. It's Primeiro Ato. Then there's I'm on Facebook, Matheus Parizi. We have the pages of our production companies, Antítese and Filmes de Abril. And Paula Pripas is the producer. She couldn't come here, but I guess there in those places, if you go to the website of the festival here, there's some information. Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for spending a few minutes with us and for being here in Dallas, bringing First Act here to Dallas. And as time goes on, things move forward, we'll be thinking about you. Hope to see you and more of your fellow Brazilian artists again. Thank you for the generous interview. Yeah. Thank you.